At this time, I'd like to call Gary Kudlarczyk, who is Vice President of the Polish American Cultural Center and also helps work in the garden. He and Ben Stefanski were in charge of this garden up until the time that Chris and I and Katie pretty much began the renovation, along with many, many other volunteers. Mike Sklodowski, you're here too. Please stand up if you're here, Mike. Thank you, Mike, for all of your help. So Gary will now give you a short history of the Polish Cultural Garden. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you to our members and our distinguished guests here today. To share with you the history of the garden would take more than a few minutes, so I'll just try to make this as simple as possible. As you enter the garden, you'll see a sign that says this is the Polish Cultural Garden. It was dedicated on October 28th, 1934. And missing from a sign, and all the signs you'll see in the gardens, are the word peace. Because all these cultural gardens are peace gardens. As you travel to the gardens, cultural gardens today, you may have passed down Martin Luther King Boulevard and saw those stately oak trees. In a few weeks will be Memorial Day, and that was 100 years ago that those trees were planted as a living memorial to the World War I soldiers that lost their lives fighting for freedom. So upon the granting of those trees and a living memorial, these are peace gardens where within the Polish community, we've made a commitment to never recognize a Polish general or a figure that has built war or dealing with the Jews that are fighting against our neighbors, because the gardens are good neighbor policies. We highlight the cultural features of the culture there, in this case our Polish garden. And from where I live in our neighborhood of Cleveland, recognizing that this is the Polish garden, next to us is the Slovenian garden, and adjacent to that's the Czech garden, it sounds like the neighborhood I grew up in. So the communities of Cleveland are all peace related, and we have a blessing today that in 1996 that Mr. Stefanski and his family began the restoration of the garden. I don't want to talk about the damage that took place during the down times of the garden history, but the Henryk Sienkiewicz bust is the only original bust from the original dedications of the gardens. And from there, the community gathered to raise money and restore the garden statues and busts that you see. Today, with the inclusion of the St. John Paul bust, is actually part of that restoration effort, though St. John Paul is a new figure to the garden. Missing in our history is the children's fountain, which was donated by the St. Casimir's Parish Children. There was a Konopnicka bust and a Helen Modrzejk tablet. So I see Richard Konashevitz out there. Thank you, Richard, for all the work you've done all these years in preserving this site, and to everyone else here. And I'll just shorten my comments here and saying thank you for attending this event, and we appreciate you to return. And just to give you the last moment is you're free to spend your time and tour each bust. The history of the bust is there, as when was it originally dedicated, when it was restored, and those financial donors that have helped make this possible. Thank you very much.